Alright guys, how we doing today? I'm the Crown Fiend, and as always, we're coming right back at you guys with another What If movie. Which, today we're doing What If Deku had the Niko style. Now, those of you who would be wondering, who or what is the Niko style? And to answer that question, it's a fighting style based on Kengan Ashura, which it is from Kengan Ashura. It's the main character's fighting style known as Oma Tokita, as he was taught it by Tokita Niko, or Niko Tokita, whichever way you want to say it. But basically it's a martial arts style that has 4 main katas to it, which are the overall classes of the Niko style. And I'll give you guys a quick breakdown over what each kata is and what each kata does. So here we go. The main 4 katas of the Niko style are Adamantine, Flame, Redirection, and Water, as each kata works completely different than the other one. As the Adamantine Kata, it involves tightening of the muscles for one's body, and it's both for defense and offense, so it's kind of for both ways. As I'm not going to go too hard in the moves of each kata right now, as that'll be explained later on. As Deku would also have the Flame Kata, which is the second kata of the Niko style. As the Flame Kata is centered around movement and positioning, giving incredible speed and agility. So it's basically more of a fast pace and agile kata form that would be really useful. And once again, I'm not going to go into each move of the Flame Kata because that's going to be explained later on, like I said. Next one is Redirection Kata, which the Redirection Kata involves manipulating the opponent's flow of power using minimal motions to turn the opponent's attack against them. That's how it is, but it's also used with kinetic vision and a lot of delicate physical control. So it is the most difficult kata to master, but it has some of the best moves out of all of the katas. As the final one is the Water Kata. Now, the Water Kata is a grappling based kata. Mainly it's used for submissions, groundwork, all of that. And it's one of the more easier ones, but it requires a huge emphasis on flexibility and fluidity of motion, which means even if you're flexible, you have to be very fluid with how you move. And there's several other ones, but that's mainly just for later on, because the katas can be used together. But there is other secret techniques to the kata, which, well, the Niko style holds many secret techniques, but its most prominent one would be Demon's Bane or Fallen Demon, including Possessing Spirit, but Possessing Spirit is mainly just called Advance. That's literally all it is, which if you read the manga and you see Advance, that's literally Possessing Spirit right there. So now that you are caught up on a brief summary of the Niko style, which don't worry, I'm going to be making a Kengan video about Oma Tokita, and then I'll go all full in depth over the Niko style and Oma's character and development, but that's not this video. So this is what if Deku had the Niko style. So with this, again, I have to give you guys a quick warning. This will tackle mature themes, and yeah, you guys know the drill by now. And if you're watching this video first on my channel, well, of course, welcome. I hope you guys do stay, and if you guys are returning viewers who haven't subscribed yet, I would heavily appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel. as we're about to really kick up the storm here, because by the time you guys watching this video, tomorrow's my birthday, which we're going to have a birthday stream probably later tonight that will lead into my birthday. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan. It might change and it might not, so I'll let you guys know ahead of time on that one. But anyway, enough rambling on. We're already almost 6 minutes in, so yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, so hope you guys enjoy. Hope you got a drink, snacks, whatever. Let's get into this, because I'm gonna have so much fun, because Kengan Ashura is such a big inspiration for me. So here we go. So where we start this off at is actually a couple years after Deku was born. So yeah, we're not going before Hisashi or anything, because yeah, Hisashi and Inko, they still get married, but Hisashi is pretty much not the best of fathers, and Inko's really not the best mother either. So while Deku is pretty much going to school with Bakugo, and Bakugo's actually kind to Deku in this, because he's not about to pick or bully somebody who's going to school with extra clothing on just to cover up the bruises he gets from home. As Deku is being physically abused by Hisashi, and Inko emotionally abuses Deku, as they think of him as just a throwaway child. So Bakugo would actually be the only person to show Deku kindness, as Bakugo would be standing up to a lot of people that would try to bully Deku, because for one, Deku has to go through enough at home, and Bakugo does try to tell the teachers, and he does try to tell Mitsuki, his mom, and his dad, even some pro heroes, but Deku just won't talk. He's scared. He doesn't want to get beaten more at home, because it's just going to be the same song and dance that, you know, his grandparents tried to do to save him before they passed away, which is try to get CPS called, as nothing would happen, because they would just say he got it from playing outside. Boys will be boys. And that's the story that they believed, as everything is easily hid in the house, so there's no real hope for Deku. He's hopeless. He doesn't watch any heroes, because he doesn't want to give himself false hope, thinking that one day he could be saved by them, because he's given up hope on that. And pretty much one night, Deku's house is actually attacked, and a burglary happens. And during the robbery of Deku's house, his mother is shot and killed, as Hisashi is put into a coma. And Deku runs away in the chaos and just doesn't go back, as he is a missing child at this point. But nobody cares enough, because nobody really even paid that much attention to Deku. So he goes missing and nobody knows anything about it. Bakugo's the only one who cares besides Mitsuki, but they don't have the resources to really look for Deku like that. As Deku would keep moving place to place, as he would eventually get to what's known as the Lawless District of Japan, which is a condemned part that slums that's just sectioned off and not even considered a part of Japan anymore. And the people living there, well, it's just tough luck to them. If they get killed, oh well, because it's no man's land out there. As Deku enters that area just to feel like he's gotten away from them, as pretty much he's walking in there and he collapses on the ground from fatigue, hunger, dehydration. And that's when he's found by a man with long brown hair, as he's wearing a jacket and some nice clothes. He's wearing a black shirt, he has pants on, some tennis shoes, as he's just chilling. As he looks at Deku and he sees something in him, so he saves Deku's life by giving him water. As Deku drinks all the water that's given to him, he says thank you. And the man says, so kid, what's your name? As Deku says, my first name is Izuku, but I don't like my last name. I don't want to be known as any type of relation to the people that were abusing me. As Deku's clothes were torn, so honestly, the man would be able to see all the bruises that Deku has all over his body. As he would grit his teeth and say, well, you don't have to go by that name anymore. Over here we can make things happen. You can start a new life. You can call me Oma Tokita. And don't worry, kid. I'll make sure nobody hurts you again. As Deku would look at the man and say, Tokita? And Oma would say, yeah, so tell me, do you want to fight? As Deku would look at him and say, yes. And he would say, well then, come on, Izuku Tokita. As Deku would say, Izuku Tokita? And Oma says, I'm adopting you right now. You are my son and disciple. I'll train you in the Niko style, a style that was passed down to me by my adopted father. And basically, Deku says, oh, what was his name? As basically, he says, the name of that man was Tokita Niko. He found me right at this very spot. I had no name. And since this is on the boundaries of Oma and Tokita, he honestly just named me Oma Tokita. And Deku would say, oh. As basically Oma would say, well, come on. As he would take Deku out of the basically lawless zone and would take him to his house, which was deep in the forest, and it's just a condemned mansion that nobody really even worries about. So, Deku would start his training with Oma, as Oma would train him in the arts of the Water Kata first. Because of Deku's already, flexibility, he would just need to work on fluidity before he could really start to practice the moves of the Water Kata. But Deku would actually prove to be very naturally gifted in the arts of martial arts. As Oma would say, that's amazing. You're actually a natural at this. Well, I'll tell you something. This Niko style, it's the best fighting style in the world. As Deku says, how many people use it? Oma would say, only I do. So, I'm the only person that can teach it to you. As Deku would say, really? And Oma would say, yep, pretty soon, you'll be the second person in the world to use it. But don't just teach it to anybody. As Deku says, why not? As Oma would say, it's a very dangerous fighting style, and it's not something that should just be given to anyone. The Niko style is sacred to him, and he's only teaching Deku because Deku reminds him so much of himself at a young age. Almost dying alone, no one left. As Deku would say, yeah, I agree. So, Deku would start learning the moves as his fluidity would come in strides. So the first move Deku would learn from the Water Kata would be called Bind of Pisces. And what it is, it's an armbar move that involves immobilizing the opponent's arm by pinning one arm by their head with one's leg and the other arm with one's hand, which is very effective at almost breaking them and causing a lot of damage to the arms very quickly. And Deku would be honestly struggling with this one at first, but a few months in he would ultimately master Bind to Pisces. The next move he would learn would be Guillotine, as Guillotine is a technique that is performed while the opponent is off balance, which means you have to set it up. But the user then grabs their front of their opponent's neck with both hands, and of course you have to make sure you're facing the opposite direction of them, and you violently pull on their neck and lift their bodies up off the ground as a lever. It basically is a heavy neck damaging blow that's not really meant to really just strike, but it can be followed up afterwards. So it takes some setup, but after the end of it, it would be a really good move to go in for a finishing chokeout. The next move he would learn is the Jellyfish Clutch, which is basically where the user runs at the opponent and catches them in a headlock, leaning down using the momentum of their run. This movement is used to viciously snap the opponent's neck from behind. So yeah, it basically snaps their neck back, and it can be easily a fatal move if you do it incorrectly. So Deku is really practicing on dummies with this. He doesn't practice it on Oma whatsoever, because with Deku's inexperience, he might accidentally kill Oma. Not that Oma is weak enough to be killed by a little kid Deku, but he doesn't want Deku feeling any type of regret while learning the Niko style at all. So the next move would be Screw Cutter Jizo, which is a technique that while the opponent is off balance, which again requires a setup, and in a supine position, you grab their arm with both hands before flipping them over into a prone position and then tightly holding that arm in a manner similar to an arm lock that also involves sitting on the opponent's shoulder. As Deku would honestly learn that one pretty easily, since it's something a lot similar to a previous move he's already mastered. So he wouldn't really get any type of real difficulty from that one. The next one he would learn is Seagrass Hold, which is a technique used to evade and then lock in a thrusting movement. The user quickly dodges a thrusting weapon such as a spear or a thrusting attack such as a punch, and he grabs and locks on to the limb under the armpit in one fluid motion. So this one is going to take Deku a little bit of difficulty because of the fluidity, and since he's not perfect at it yet, given that he's a child, as Deku would be training in the Water Kata for about a year, because he still has 2 more moves to master. But it is really paying off for him, because the grappling part is going to be the easiest part of his training, which is something that Oma's wanting to get out of the way. The next one is the Water Dragon's Vein, which is basically a variation of a bow and arrow hold, if you know what that is. If not, I'm about to explain. So the Water Dragon's Vein is where the user lies on their back with their arms clutching their opponent's neck and knees as their legs are pushing up on their opponent's back. This causes loss of consciousness within 7 seconds due to the carotid sinus reflex, though it has been surmised that the true power of this technique is to really just snap your opponent's spine, which is mean that this water's move is honestly just to paralyze your opponent. So yeah, the next one and final technique of the Water Kata is Water Mirror. And this is the ultimate technique of the Water Kata. So basically, this can be used when the user cannot use their normal locks or holds, because it's just like not possible, such as they have one broken arm or something like that. This technique really just involves using a part of your opponent's body to place their opponent in a lock or hold. So basically you're taking your opponent's limb and using it to your advantage to perform your hold. So literally it's like you wrap your opponent's arm around their neck and then you use yours to really force it to stay in place. Think of that as an example. And since there's no real specific form to water mirror, it can be very flexible and change. Like, you can really set it up in any position you really want because there is no actual form to it. So it's a perfect move to use in any situation. Like, it's really just awesome. So yeah, that one is going to take Deku a very, very long time to master. It takes him about 6 months just with that one move. But after that, Deku is basically going to learn the Flame Kata, which is something that would be better for him to go to next because of his already, flexibility and now his fluidity, which will give him perfect stature for the Flame Kata, which is going to really just play into him getting increased speed and agility. His flexibility is going to allow him to get agility easier, so it's overall just a better starting off point for him. So the first technique he would learn is Flash Fire. And basically, this is a move that, it's like a flicker, like a flame. And it's basically just to confuse your opponent. It's kind of think of this as like after image, and you basically got it. The next one is Phantom Pace. This is a technique where you quickly step sideways at the moment right before your opponent attacks, causing your opponent to think that their attack faced right through them. So basically you sidestep right out of the way at the last possible second as quickly as possible, and it leaves your opponent dazed thinking that they hit you when in reality they did not. So Deku's able to learn these actually pretty quickly, which is really surprising Oma, because Oma as a child wasn't able to learn the Flame Kata very easily, but he eventually did grow to use the Flame Kata one of, if not the most. So yeah, the next one would be Raging Fire, as this is a sprinting technique, so Deku would really have to train his cardiovascular systems for this one, but it's performed after you dig your toes into the ground, allowing you to accelerate at unthinkable speeds. So it's really just like you dig your toes into the ground and then you sprint at full force, which means you get an incredible amount of speed boost. So it's really just like something that can be used to go with an attack. So honestly, Raging Fire, Deku's able to mix with the Water Kata to really just help him perform quicker grappling movements, since he doesn't know any of the Adamantine or Redirection Kata yet, because Oma is a very strict teacher and wants Deku to learn everything at a precise time and movement. And he's seeing how Deku's advancing to each new step, as he sees that the Fire Kata, or really Flame Kata, is no real challenge to Deku. So the final move of the Flame Kata is the Earth Shrinking, which is its ultimate technique, which basically it's the essence of a technique lying in standing on one's bones alone without the use of muscles. So think of it as quickly just shifting your center of gravity in intervals. which is visibly different from regular motions, which will deal like illusions to your opponent. And when you backstep, the distance between you and your opponent is subtly shrinking. So, yeah, think of it like you're really just quickly backstepping, but you're only using your center of gravity. You're not using any of your muscles movements whatsoever. And basically, the Flame Kata is a mixture of setting up increased movement speeds or completely dodging and confusing your opponent, which Deku is very good at, so the Flame Kata is easily mastered. Now, the first real offensive kata that Deku would learn is the Adamantine Kata. And at this point, Deku is about 10 years old. So he's only got about 5 years left to learn these moves, which is really not a whole lot, but Deku's actually doing very well. His schooling is being taken care of because Oma has connections with the Kengan Association, which is looking after Deku as well. Everyone in the Kengan Association really just likes Deku as far as the few people that actually know of him. Which, the only people that really know about Deku and Oma is Yamashita and Nogi. So the Yamashita Corporation and Nogi branch are the only two people that really know about Deku and are supporting Deku and putting him through, schools by sending Yamashita out there with textbooks to really teach Deku, along with Yamashita's son, Kazuo, who is a brilliant scientist. So Deku's intelligence is already getting a huge boost, and he's becoming very business-like oriented, thinking about what's the best way to achieve things. So he's also very smart, just not a bruiser. So he's battle tactically thinking a genius, as intelligence-wise with academics, a genius. Business thinking, genius. Because Deku is getting the best of trainings from Oma in combat, which he really looks at Oma as his, honestly, biological father. Which Deku still having the green hair, he would actually dye it a dark shade of brown when he's with Oma, just so he doesn't have to look at his family's actual heritage. So he really just wants to look like Oma, which is understandable since Oma did save him from a life of abuse and being almost nearly dead. It's kind of nice for Deku to really have someone there for him. So Deku's first move in the Adamantine Kata is Indestructible, which Indestructible is a very defensive oriented move, but is also a very offensive one at the same time. I'm about to explain why. So basically, this allows your body to really defend from powerful blows or attack the opponent in a powerful attack. Throughout the, clenching of all of your muscles at the moment of impact, tensing and tightening all of your muscles at once, you get a very dense part of your body, because once you tighten your muscles in your body starts to dense up, and your density of your body increases when you do that. So basically, the tighter your muscles are tensed up, the more dense your body is, which prevents a lot of energy from getting in, and it gets expelled right back out. So this is how you can defend and attack at the same time with it, if that makes any sense to any of you. So yeah, it also allows people to withstand like very internal based attacks, like attacks that really try to attack your internal organs. That is a great defensive move to block it, because it won't allow the move to really get through all that much. The next move would be Iron Breaker, which Iron Breaker is a definite offensive move, which what Iron Breaker is, it's basically a strike enhancing technique. It is delivered while tensing and tightening the fingers muscles, but not only that, it tightens up in your hands or your feet, whichever one you really want to strike with, and it can hit hard enough to leave an indent on a person's body in the shape of your fist or your foot, depending on where you hit and what part of your body you're using. And Deku actually gets the hang of that one with slight difficulty, but overall it's a very doable technique for him, as he's also performing like a lot of weightlifting with this and calisthenics. Like Oma's really just going in on everything with Deku. He's doing some heavy weightlifting, but it's very light based. Like he does a heavy amount of weight, but it's very light compared to normal weightlifting. He's mainly focusing on calisthenics, which, for those of you who don't know what calisthenics are body weight exercises like push-ups, sit-ups, crunches, stuff like that, and pull-ups as well. As pretty much Deku's next technique would be the Iron Fingers. So Iron Fingers really is self-explanatory, but also has a little bit of trickiness to it, because of the tightening in the muscles of the fingers. Like I said, Iron Fingers, you get where the muscles are going to be the tenses, and it's basically hardening the joints of the fingers, which is an extremely versatile technique if you really think about it, because you can tighten your fingers and lock your joints into place to where your fingers could go straight through a person, but it would even allow you to use your fingers if they're broken. Like if your finger bones are broken, just by using the technique, you will be able to use your hand to attack as well, including like keeping it in a fist state to keep hitting your opponent. So it can be used with a lot of different types of the Adamantine Kata techniques as well. So it's very useful and extremely versatile, like I said. Now, the last one of the Adamantine is, of course, the ultimate technique, and that is bone binding. Now, bone binding is a very difficult technique to master, as this one takes Deku the longest out of any technique to really master. It causes him to have a solid 10 months alone dedicated to this move by itself. As the ultimate technique of the Adamantine Kata, the bone binding technique is using precise and delicate muscle control. So this is what's really throwing Deku off, is the delicate part of it, which is basically the user is able to move body parts where a bone has been broken. So it's not like the Iron Fingers, where you're literally tensing your muscles up to work as a makeshift internal sling or cast. No, you're basically using your delicate muscle control to move parts of your body that were broken. So completely different, because you're not just forcibly tightening your muscles, you're doing it delicately. Which, if anyone that knows, like, trying to do things delicately if you're not a naturally delicate person is extremely difficult in and of itself. But yeah, it's just, that is the full technique. It's just like you're able to do delicate muscle control to move parts of your body where it's just been broken. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to Adamantine. So the last kata, and the most trickiest kata of them all, because this kata, as redirection, involves you have to see the flow of power, which is not something easily read. It takes a lot of experience of combat fighting, and this is why Oma saved it for last with Deku, because Deku has to be at the point to where he's been fighting Oma for years at this point, so he should be able to see Oma's flow of power, which Oma's a very hard person to get a read on in general. So if Deku's able to read Oma, he's pretty much able to read even the world's heaviest or fastest fucking fighters and be able to take them down with the Niko style. Even people like All Might, because it doesn't matter really how strong you are, as long as you get off the right technique at the right time with this type of martial arts style, you can win a fight. So yeah, and since All Might's not really a person who has a lot of techniques, you could say, in martial arts, yeah, you'll see later on, but yeah, that's a little tease of something that's yet to come. So the first technique that Deku would learn in the Redirection Kata is Weeping Willow. Now, Weeping Willow alters the trajectory of your opponent, which basically, when they attack, you alter the trajectory of that attack, which redirects their flow of power. And this will make your opponent's moves miss. And it also allows them to lose their balance, which is perfect for setting up a hard-hitting counterattack or counter-grapple. So with this one, Deku actually learns it relatively easy, as it's the easiest one to learn in the Redirection Kata. So next up is Change of Scenery. Now this one, it requires a lot more physical strength from Deku mixed with, redirecting them. And it's basically where you hurl your opponent like you're twisting them up in a tornado type of throw and launching them into the air. So that's basically all Change of Scenery is. Now, Chi blockage is where things start to get difficult for Deku. So basically, Chi blockage is a powerful palm strike, and the original use for it was to destroy nerves. However, it's also used to suppress the autonomic nervous system, which is something very detailed in and of itself that I'm not getting into in this video, because that would drag this out to an hour in itself, and I just don't feel like making it that long. Anyway, Deku would take a very long time to learn that one, as it would take him approximately 8 months. Now, the next one is Entanglement. And basically what Entanglement is, basically Weeping Willow, but you take it one step beyond. You're not just altering your opponent's trajectory anymore, but you're also grabbing onto them and holding them while you do so, which is basically where you can redirect their power back into them. Causing this can honestly set up for easy dislocations of the joints or breaking their bones. It is very easily to do that with Entanglement. So yeah, this one is something that Deku grasps very easily, even at a more advanced stage, because of his mastery of Weeping Willow. As Deku would honestly like Entanglement more than Weeping Willow, though, because of how much damage you can really do with it. So with that mastered, Deku's next technique would be Flowing Edge, which is a very defensive technique. Basically what Flowing Edge does is it deflects an attack's trajectory and applying power to its side. So it can even be used to deflect bullets. by calculating the angle and basically just a lot of math and a lot of smarts. So yeah, not something that just anybody could do. But you also, inside their projectiles, which you just curve it at an angle, as you have to do that with the hard bone in order to change the projectile's trajectory. So think of it like this. You're using the side of your bones to redirect its trajectory off. So that's basically what flowing edge is. As Deku can appreciate this technique, but it's not one that he really likes to use all that much, but he does find that it is very useful, especially with guns. So he does take the time to really master it. Now, the final one, and the one that gives Deku the most grief, is the ultimate technique of the Redirection Kata, Marionette. As Marionette is basically, you're amplifying your body's internal power and control with minimal usage of energy. Meaning, even when your stamina is extremely low, you can still use this technique to get the best of your opponent, as you amplify your body's internal power with little trade-off in terms of energy. So it's very, very useful, but Deku hates the precision that it takes to pull it off. But he does end up mastering it. And he masters all of that in approximately at the age of 15. Now, he's in high school, but high school isn't really where UA comes into play, because UA, again, will be a college, because that's just what I like to do. And it makes more sense, because to fully master everything in the Niko style, you cannot start training at the age of 5 and master everything at the age of 15, because it takes more than a decade to master everything, as Deku also has to master the advance, or at least be taught the advance, which Oma is really wanting to teach Deku, but he doesn't think he's ready for it quite yet. As he also tells Deku that there is another kata to the Niko style, as basically Deku's like, what, there's a fifth one? And Ilma says yes, it's called Nil Kata, and it only has one technique inside of it. It's also known as the empty form, as pretty much it uses not one of the 4 katas of the Niko style, but rather a complication of breathing exercises. So yeah, and the only move in there is called Void, which basically it involves exhalations through increasing the abdominal pressure, focusing awareness towards the body's midrin. This is used as a means of concentration and internal regulation. So even if you have difficulty breathing, Void will help you breathe perfectly, which is something Deku has to really get used to, as it's not a combat style, but more of a calming style of the Niko style, which Deku really has to take a lot of time to learn, as he has an extra 4 years to learn this. So there are a few combined katas of the Niko style, which involve fire water, which of course you should already know it combines the flame and water katas, and is basically a rapid transition from a forward dash to a low tackle, evading any incoming attacks while tackling your opponent to the ground at the same time. The next move of it is Flashing Steel, which is a combination of Raging Fire and, of course, the indestructible Flashing Steel. So, this is how it moves. It is the fastest attack of the Niko style, which means it's the fastest move that Deku could ever pull off, and it's taking a lot of time to master, as it involves charging the opponent at a high speed and delivering a blow with tightened muscles. As you hit with momentum and tightened muscles, it's a devastating blow, and it can be best used as a counter, which means its overall best use isn't to go full on just charge at your opponent. It's more like better utilized as a counter blow, because not only can you take your opponent's flow of power and add it into it as a counter, which will give you double the strength, because of course that's just the way that would work, but along with the tense and hardened muscles, you're also bouncing some of that power right back at them. So literally you're over doubling your strength, and its speed alone is what makes it so dangerous. But it does make you very predictable. That's the trade-off. And Flashing Steel has at least 3 forms, which is Blast, a blow with an elbow, Smash, which is a punch, and Pierce, which is a finger stab. So, yes, that is all there is to Flashing Steel. Now, the other one is called Flickering Flame, which is a combination of flame and redirection. Which Flickering Flame is a technique that shifts the user's center of gravity when at full sprint, which is very difficult to do. Like, it is incredibly difficult, and Deku, honestly, he's getting very agitated with it. But he does manage to master it as well. However, it puts a huge amount of strain on Deku's legs because of the shifting of center of gravity at a full sprint, which is used to really just change directions. But still, all of that pressure on the legs isn't something that Deku's going to use all that well. And there's another one called Iron Breaker Revolution, which is Adamantine and Water Katas combined. And basically, it's where the user throws your opponent first, and you're throwing them to the ground, not away or just into the air. No, it's to the ground, and then you follow it up with an Iron Breaker punch. That is exactly it. As Deku is able to master Iron Breaker Revolution, it just easily, so easily. Now we're getting to the last 2 combined, moves of the Niko style, which is where Deku would learn Swimming Swallow. And basically, that's redirection and water combined, which is a rush of blows with an unpredictable and quickly altering trajectories, making them incredibly difficult to guard against. Basically, to dumb that down, you're punching a huge amount of times very quickly and with altering trajectories. Like if you throw one at straight, the next one you're throwing at quick succession will be a hook, and then an uppercut, then another jab. You just keep changing up the direction and keep it unpredictable. That's basically what it is. Now, the final one will be Will-O-the-Wisp, which is using redirection and flame katas. which Will-O-the-Wisp would be Deku's favorite, combined ones, as it's a turning side kick that redirects the flow of the kick into a full body stomp. So yes, this move is so powerful you can smash a hole into the ground when utilized. So Deku finds that very useful. Now, the only secret technique that Deku would ever learn would be, the advance, because that's the only thing that Oma would want to teach him at that time. But there would be one more that Deku would try to go through, but it would be incredibly difficult and dangerous to his life. But it could ultimately get him out of a very tricky situation, which called Demon's Bane. And it's something that you have to know and have an extreme control over all 4 of the katas, which means you have to master them completely and have no flaws whatsoever in any of the 4 katas and all of their techniques. Because first one that you have to utilize is redirection to change the direction of your opponent's power. And then you use the water to allow the power to flow throughout the body, and then you use flame to check positioning, then finally hit them with the adamantine form to deliver the diverted power back to your opponent. So, to dumb that down, basically, you take your opponents and you redirect them. You then in turn take the power from your opponent's attack and channel it through your body like a stream of water, and then with the flame kata you quickly check for all positionings, all possible hit points that would ultimately give you the best optimal damage. And then adamantine is after you find it, you strike it quickly and you use all of that power that you were flowing through you to channel it, along with tensing your muscles to the max and hitting your opponent, which would be an incredibly lethal technique as well, if utilized in a lethal way. As any really ordinary opponent would die from that attack. It would take someone extremely strong to survive it. So that would be all that Deku would learn from Oma, as Deku would still have about a year left in high school, as him and Yamashita would just chill a bit, because Deku would still fight with Oma every day, but Oma would tell him that he's actually got an upcoming match at the Kangen Association, as Deku would ask Yamashita when could he be part of the Kangen Association, as Oma would just tell Deku that, there's no need to rush it, he'll join when he's ready. But for now, he needs to keep working on his Niko style. He needs to evolve it past the point to where Oma left it in his hands, as right now, Deku only has 2 hands on it, but he's not holding it. Not on his own, not completely. To completely take the Niko style from Oma, Deku has to add his own flair to it. As Deku would say, okay, and Oma would warn Deku about using the advance, as he suffered multiple damages to his internal body from overusing the advance in his youth. Because in Canon Kangen, Oma's about 28 to 29 years old. Maybe in his early 30s in Omega, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. Now Oma's in his 40s. So yeah, he's out of his prime and he's on the decline. As Oma would actually send Deku to go do fights here and there to practice his Niko style, as Deku would come back winning a lot of fights and prize money on top of that. Even though he's not in the Kengan Association yet, Yamashita sees promise in Deku, as he's taken out a lot of high priority fighters, including Japan's reigning heavyweight champion, as that's more of a secret thing, but everyone in the Kengan Association knows Deku's the real deal. But Deku would be out on the run one day after a fight, as the police would be trying to arrest him for illegal street fighting, because keep in mind it's still illegal, but they haven't seen his face, so they don't know who he is. But during this time, Oma's having a fight, and well, it's not going so good for Oma, because Oma's not just fighting one person, he's fighting a whole army of people, as they eventually get the better of him, as quirks are a thing, and with Oma being quirkless, like, he's not able to really combat a whole army of them by himself anymore. In his prime, yeah, sure, but now that he's a lot older, his body can't handle the advance anymore, so he can't rely on it, which means all he has is his Niko style. And while he does take out a large majority of them, they do inflict mortal wounds on Oma, but Oma is ultimately victorious, but he's bleeding out. And with nobody there to get him to a hospital quick enough, as Deku would come across Oma, see him lying in a pool of his own blood. As Deku would look at Oma and say, "No, I can't lose you. Don't you die. Didn't you say your Niko style is the best in the world?" As Deku would have tears forming up in his eyes, as basically Oma would say, Don't cry. It'll be alright. It just means I wasn't strong enough." As Deku would have tears just falling from his face, as Oma would say, "Yeah, I got no one to blame but myself. This body of mine wasn't able to keep up with my spirit." As before he could tell Deku anything else, he would have bled out and died in Deku's arms. With Yamashita getting there, his tears would fall down Yamashita's face, realizing Oma really is dead this time. As they would put Oma to rest, and Yamashita would pull strings to have Izuku Midoriya erased off of any servers around the world, as the Kengan Association has a lot of pull. As for Deku, he would now be known legally and would have an ID legally registered as Izuku Tokita, as his ring name would be the Ashura, taking up Oma's name. As pretty much Deku would finally join the Kengan Association after his last year of high school, from Yamashita's endorsement alone, but he would have to be signed up to a company. The Yamashita Corporation can no longer hold a fighter with them, since they are the organizers of the Kengan Association, which means Deku has to have a company. But luckily, there's one institute that is wanting to branch into the Kengan Association, that being UA High School, as Nezu's the one who's trying to branch out into it. So, Deku has his contract, as no real professional, as experienced legacy fighter like Oma, or even the newer, experienced fighters that would come around would want to even team up with UA whatsoever, because of how new they are. New companies always have a bad rap because they are inexperienced, and it's just better to let the newbies team up for them. and to really just go after them by themselves. So Deku is the only newbie in this. So he's actually teamed up with Nezu. As Nezu would say that, if he wanted to become a student, he could pull some strings and get him in after he sees him fight, to see if he actually has the skills to back up what he's saying. As Deku would say, sure. As he would look into the audience and say, who wants to fight? As all the fighters would say, you gotta put something on the line, kid. As Yamashita would say, very well, I'll put something up for grabs. As everyone looks at Yamashita with surprise. As he says, this will be his debut match. This is something that needs recognition. Whoever can take him on and beat him will get 100 billion yen. As pretty much everyone's wanting to fight Deku at this point. But the one guy who steps up to fight him is none other than the pro wrestler himself, Jun Sukubayashi. As he says, I fought Oma one time before. Now I'ma fight you. As Deku says, bring it on. As he gets into his fighting trunks, throwing everything else to his side, as Nezu's looking on with great interest, as he says, give it your all, kid. As basically, Yamashita would be the ringside introducer, as he would introduce Jun Sukubayashi by his name, and would say that he is a legacy Kengan fighter who fought in the Kengan Annihilation Tournament, and pretty much Deku would remember hearing about a Jun Sukubayashi. As Deku would just get ready, as Yamashita would introduce Deku as Izuku Tokita, as everyone would stop as they would hear the name Tokita, and they would hear his ring name, the Ashura. As basically everyone would go quiet as Deku would just stare down Jun, and the fight would begin. As Sukubayashi has a habit of not blocking any of his opponent's attacks because he says that's not the spirit of true pro wrestling. As Deku would fight over and over, he would use several Niko style techniques, but he would be predominantly using redirection, as he would redirect the flow of power of Jun, but Jun would already have fought the Niko style enough to really know what to expect. As Deku would be forced to use, for the first time in a long time, the advance. And this is when Jun starts to go on the decline, because Deku has it to where he's easily able to use redirection and water katas with the advance. However, he can't use any adamantine forms whatsoever with the advance, or he would rupture his blood vessels internally and bleed out internally. So all he can use is limited raging fire because of the same, reason, and water and redirection katas, which basically cuts his Niko style usage in half. But the trade-off is well worth it. With the explosive power up in speed, along with the increased strength of power, he's able to defeat Jun Sukubayashi by using one of the Niko style's water katas, known as Screw Cutter Jizo, which would then allow him to break Jun's arm, ending the match. So, with that, Deku would win his first ever Kengan match, and would honestly get a reputation for beating a legacy fighter. And keep in mind, Jun's very old, so he's not like he's fighting prime Kengan Ashura Jun. No, he's fighting a more older version of him. But Nezu would see enough and would tell Deku that he has a place for him in his school at UA, as Deku accepts. Going to school wouldn't be that bad. Getting a professional hero licensing, and as well being a Kengan fighter, it's something that would really just make Oma jealous, as that's what Deku thinks, but he also thinks it's the best way to honor Oma's name. So basically, Deku just breezes through the last 10 months fighting in Kengan fights, in between, like 5 months at a time. So Deku's total wins would be 3. He would have 3 wins, 0 losses in the Kengan matches, which is very good for a newbie. As Deku would then start to attend UA College, as he would get in through recommendation from Nezu himself. He would be put in Class 1A, but there'd be a slight difference to this, as the teacher for Class 1A would not be Aizawa. Instead, it would be Mirko, as Mirko would see Deku's body and would immediately be impressed, as Aizawa actually got a promotion from teacher to Nezu's right-hand man, the assistant principal, as Aizawa would honestly have a lot more power in that role, and Mirko would be hired on to help teach the next generation. So that's how Mirko's the teacher, and Aizawa's not out of the story. He's just in a better position. So, with that, Deku walks into the class, and when Mirko sees him, she immediately asks him what does he do, as Deku says he's a martial artist. She asked what his quirk is, and Deku says he's quirkless, as pretty much he would sit down and be very quiet. He wouldn't have dyed his hair anymore, so it would be his natural green hair. But basically, he would look just like a green-haired version of Oma. He has that exact same body build, which is basically his body is a Greek god physique. So yeah, that's how Deku's looking. As pretty much the rest of the students come in, as Deku's the first one there, because he is staying with Nezu, because he's got nowhere else to go. So Nezu took him in. And pretty much he sees everybody else entering, as Bakugo wouldn't be loud and obnoxious at all, because if you remember, back in the day, he actually defended Deku, and he was very kind to Deku. So Bakugo's personality in this would be completely 180. He wouldn't be this loud, obnoxious jerk and asshole. He would be a more chilled out person, knowing that despite his quirk, he wasn't able to save his best friend. So that would be something that's still haunting him. From all those years, he's never forgotten about Deku. And when he walks in and sees Deku, he would run over there to him and would say, "I have a question, but are you Izuku Midoriya?" As Deku says, "The name's Izuku Tokita, but I do remember you, Bakugo." As Bakugo would have tears in his eyes as he would say, "I thought you were dead. I don't know what happened, but wait, why is your last name Tokita? Could have swore it was Midoriya." And Deku says, "You're mistaken. It's always been Tokita." As he says that he had a father that passed away. As Bakugo says, "Yeah, Hisashi, right?" And Deku says, "No. His name was Oma. Oma Tokita. And he was the strongest man he ever met." As Bakugo would be confused, but ultimately he would just say, "I understand." So Deku would honestly be given special privileges being the Kengan Association member for Nezu, but it has to be kept on the down low, because Nezu doesn't want anyone to know that UA is now part of the Kengan Association, as the Kengan Association is hidden from society. It is extremely illegal to be a part of, but it does give a lot of benefits as well, as matches won in the Kengan Association give you expansion rights, or can get you more money, or make you have a favor owed to you by someone of another corporation. So it's very lucrative to be a part of the Kengan Association in more than one way. As Deku's undefeated, Nezu would be very happy with Deku, and knowing that the trials that he'll have to go through at UA, especially for being quirkless, is just going to make him even stronger. So, Deku's all for it, because he wants to be the strongest, and he doesn't want anybody looking down on him. Never again. And he wants to be better than Oma ever was. As pretty much Bakugo would sit right beside Deku as they would catch up. As pretty much Bakugo would be very happy to have his friend back, as Deku would be very happy as well. But Deku would be more captivated by Mirko than anything. Seeing her muscular build and her attitude, he would find that very attractive, because he would honestly really love strong-willed women, especially physically strong women. So, he would find Mirko to be very attractive. And since it's college, there's no real reason why he can't hit on her outside of class. And there's no reason why Mirko can't hit on Deku, as long as they're not in class doing it. And pretty much Mirko says that they are going to have a quirk assessment, as that's part of the curriculum for day one students. So Deku would just get up and follow her order to go down there and get changed into his sports gear, which everyone would look at Deku, as Kirishima would say, "Dude, what type of training have you done?" As he would see the scars on Deku's body, but he would also see the physique of a Greek god staring right back at him. As basically, Deku just says, "Oh, this is nothing. This is more or less just from years of dedicated martial arts training." And basically, Ojiro hears that, and he says, "Wait, you're a martial artist? What martial arts form do you use?" As Deku says, "That depends. What form of martial arts do you use?" And in this, I'm changing up Ojiro's, martial arts style. I'm actually going to give him a more jujitsu based fighting style instead of a karate type of fighting style. Instead, he's more of a Brazilian jiu-jitsu type of fighter now. As he would tell Deku Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I kind of know someone like that." As he would be thinking about Cosmo Imai, the king of stranglers. As he would say that his fighting style is called the Niko style. As pretty much everyone would say, "Niko style?" As Ojiro would say, "Isn't that a dead martial arts?" As Deku would grab him by the throat and say, "What are you calling a dead martial art? The Niko style is the best in the world." As he would say that and would immediately think back to Oma dying. He would let him go and would walk out of there. As Ojiro would say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that no one uses it." And Deku says, "I do. I am a master of the Niko style." As basically Deku would say that, but he knows he's really not. He still has a lot to grow. As pretty much Ojiro would just feel really bad about doing that, as Baku would say, "Next time you want to say something stupid like that, don't." As pretty much he would walk out, basically shoulder checking Ojiro. putting him on notice, as Bakugo would still have that protective side of him over Deku, as Bakugo would really just see Deku as his long-lost brother, and have founding that brother once again, it would mean everything to Bakugo. A second chance to not fail and lose Deku again. So everybody gets out there, as Deku is chosen to go first because Mirko is really just loving his physique of his body, so Deku says, okay, what the hell, why not? So he grabs the ball, and honestly, there's not a whole lot that he could use, but he does use the Adamantine form, which means, of course, he's using, the tensed muscle technique as he throws it incredibly hard. And with brute strength alone, as well as the Adamantine Kata, he just chunks the ball about 600 meters, which is very impressive for a non-quirked person in this, as Mirko's very impressed with Deku. So Bakugo goes up next as he gets his cannon number. Everybody else gets their Cannondales, as for the race, Deku actually wins. Using the Flame Kata, he actually wins the race, as Mirko is surprised that a quirkless guy outbeat a guy with a speed quirk. As even Ida's surprised at this, and he's like, wait a minute, I didn't even see this guy at the entrance exam. How did he get in without having a quirk? And that's when people start spreading rumors about Deku being Nezu's adopted son or whatever, as Deku would immediately shut them down, as he would say he only had one father, and he's dead. As everyone kind of feels really bad now, as he says that Nezu took him in because he had nowhere to go. That doesn't indicate why he's at this school. He's at this school because he wants to surpass what his dad was. As everyone says, well, what was your dad? And pretty much all Deku says is he was one of the strongest people in the world. And that's when everyone would just say, yeah, right, your dad couldn't have been anything near All Might. And Deku says, All Might would never have been able to beat my father. Solo, hand to hand, one-on-one, I swear, All Might would have lost. As Mirko says, wait a minute, you're saying your pops was strong enough to beat All Might? And Deku says, damn straight I am. And Mirko says, you know everything he knows? As Deku would say, yeah, pretty much. She says, alright then, let's me and you have a fight. As the students are just looking and they're saying, what? And Deku says, alright, let's fight. As pretty much Mirko gets set as Deku is set as well. Mirko would try to really just rush Deku down, but she wouldn't be able to get to him in time before Deku really used Flash Fire, which she sees multiple versions of Deku and she's very confused, but she starts hitting them as she gets close to hitting the real Deku before he uses Phantom Pace, where she feels like she hit him, but she actually didn't. As Deku would then end up using Iron Breaker. As soon as he uses Iron Breaker, Mirko feels it right there in her side, as she sees the indent of Deku's fist. As she's just like, what the hell? This hurts. As Deku just says, that's Adamantine Kata right there for you. As everyone's just like, what the hell? He's outpacing a pro hero? This is insane. As Deku just says, "You want to keep going?" As Mirko says, "You bet your ass I do." As she tries to rush at Deku again, he says, "Water Kata, Entanglement." As he catches her and nearly breaks her bones or dislocates her joints. As she just says, okay. She gives up. As Deku lets up, because she knows that if she kept going, Deku was just gonna beat her. It would have been plain and simple. As Deku's martial arts are just too strong. She can't handle it. As Ojiro seeing this would realize just how far ahead Deku is in martial arts than him. As he would feel really bad, even worse than he did in the locker room, saying that the Niko style is a dead form of martial arts. As he also feels belittled by Deku's overall martial arts prowess and ability, along with his strength. And Deku just says that that's just a little bit about the Niko style. As he looks right at Ojiro and says, "Not bad for a dead martial arts, right?" As Ojiro wouldn't say anything. As Deku says, "That's what I thought." As he would head back to the locker room and get changed. As pretty much Mirko would be very surprised with Deku, and Nezu would be very happy with Nezu hearing that he beat Mirko without even breaking her bones, but making her give up a fight. That's something that's thought to be near impossible. As Deku would say, "She's pretty cute though. I enjoyed fighting her. I should fight her again sometime." As Nezu says, "Why don't you just ask her out? I mean, you do have that privilege. Because, for one, you're both of legal age. 2, class is no longer in session. And 3, I'm not really going to hold that against you." As Deku says, "Very well. I'll ask her out." As Deku would be walking from Nezu's office back towards the gate, as he would see Mirko and say, "Hey, Mirko." As she would say, "Oh, yeah, what's up, Tokita?" As Deku would say, "Tokita?" And she's like, "That's your name, isn't it?" And Deku says, "Yeah, my bad." As he just says, "You want to go grab something to eat?" As Mirko says, "Yeah, I could eat. Especially after that fight." And basically, Deku's happy to hear that. So he heads off to get a bite to eat with Mirko. And during this time, he's actually being watched by someone. And they say, could he be the tiger's vessel? As Deku and Mirko would be talking at a restaurant, and basically, she would just start asking him questions about the Niko style, and Deku wouldn't really be giving her any type of answers, because for one, he really doesn't want to talk about the Niko style to somebody. Like, he just prefers to keep it to himself. As he would just tell her that, they would like, if she would like, that they could train together. As Mirko would say, "Really?" And Deku says, "Well, I do need to keep in shape, and I could use someone to point out some flaws of mine." As Mirko would say, "Very well then, I accept." As she would actually just be looking at Deku and she would say, "I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think you're pretty damn cute, kid." And Deku would say, "Well, I'm not a kid." And Mirko would say, "Yeah, I know. It'd be kind of awkward if you were." As Deku would say, "Well, you're pretty fine yourself." As pretty much Mirko would say, "Want to make something of it?" And Deku says, "Why the hell not?" And Mirko says, "Okay, we'll go to my place tonight." And Deku just says, "Fine." as, after all, he does really admire her strength and her straightforwardness, along with her strong will. So, Deku heads back to Mirko's place, and they spend the night together. And pretty much, they head back to school together. Deku's first one there again. As time passes and day after day, Deku and Mirko, after school, they spar together. And then Deku heads off and does his own thing. As he still does have Kengan matches, but they're not really that prevalent right now. As Yamashita refuses to give Deku a actual Kengan match before a certain deadline. So Deku has 5 months until his next Kengan match, where Yamashita has to give him a match. So until then, Deku is off of Kengan, as pretty much Deku's just like, fine. Nezu's not too worried about it because he already knows Deku will win his Kengan match, because the people he's going to be going against don't have a very strong fighter whatsoever. And they just think that because their fighter won 12 matches and lost, 2 matches, that Deku's only 3 matches were just flukes. He just got lucky. And Nezu's talking some mad shit to them, saying that Deku is the strongest Kengan fighter in the whole Kengan Association. He's going to win. So, Nezu says, alright then, double or nothing. And the bet is sealed. And when Nezu had to double up, he put the entire UA Academy on the line. As Nezu is telling Deku that, and Deku's like, are you fucking insane? And Nezu just says, no, I'm not. I'm quite sane, my boy. And Deku says, gosh damn it, you have unimaginable gall. As Nezu says, well, I have utmost confidence in you. After all, we can't afford to lose this one. And Deku says, no shit, Sherlock. As pretty much Nezu would say, yes, yes. As Deku would say, well, time to amp up the training. As Nezu says, take a day off. You have Heroes vs. Villains test coming up tomorrow. I want you at peak form. And Deku would say, very well. Why do I have to compete in that? As Nezu says, it's mandatory for your grades. As Deku's like, fine. Just don't bore me. As pretty much, Nezu would say, of course. So, Bakugo would actually be walking home with Deku, as, Mirko has to do other work, and her and Deku aren't training for the day, so he has no real reason to stick around. But Mirko does send him some pictures. If you know, so yeah. As Deku's just like, damn. Bakugo looks and he says, oh shit, so you guys have that type of relationship. And Deku just says, shut up. As Bakugo just says, hey man, I'm just trying to play with you. As Deku says, phrasing. Bakugo says, not like that. And Deku says, how to get you back. As Bakugo says, you've changed a lot, man. You've gotten so strong. But tell me, what's your quirk? As Deku says, I've told you before, I'm quirkless. I don't have one. No great power manifested whatsoever. As pretty much Bakugo said, well, that sucks. As Deku says, not really. My martial arts skills, they more than make up for not having a quirk. As pretty much Bakugo says, with that I can't deny. So Deku and Bakugo head their separate ways, and Bakugo says, if I end up losing to you at the event tomorrow, then I want you to teach me how to use the Niko style. As Deku says, sorry, but can't do that. I can't just teach it to just anyone. As Bako says, so I gotta earn it. And Deku says, you gotta earn it. And Bako says, alright then, see ya. So, basically, Deku heads on home. As he's not really in much of a hurry anymore, so he's just chilling, walking around, taking in the view, as he just sits by the water, contemplating, and he uses Void as basically the Void is just helping Deku stay calm, as he's pretty much just loving life at the moment, but he just can't get over the sight of Niko's death as he puts his hands in the water trying to wash off the blood that's not there. As he would have tears form up and he would wipe them away quickly, as he would say, yeah, it's time to go home. As he would go home, but something would tell him not to. So he would head to a flower shop. He would buy some flowers and go to Oma's grave, where there he would meet a man that looked a lot like Oma Tokita. As he would say, who are you? As the man would say, it's rude to ask for others' names without first presenting your own. And Deku says, who the hell are you? As the man would say, fine, my name is Gao Ryuk. As Deku says, Gao, as in the Gao style, the murderer. And Gao says, I only killed those that were absolutely necessary. And Deku says, oh, I'm sure you did. As basically Gao would just tell him that, you know, I sense a lot of frustration between the two of us. As Deku would say, you're not telling me what you're doing at Oma's grave. As Ryuk tells him, I'm paying respects. As pretty much Deku's like, wait, what? As Gao would move at Deku with his, superior footwork, as he would reveal to Deku the flaws of his footwork. As he would say, if you want, I could train you to eliminate those flaws in your footwork. It would make you a way better fighter. And Deku would say, tell me, what was Oma to you? As Ryuk would look at him and say, he was like an adopted cousin. And pretty much Deku would say, well then I guess that makes us family. My name is Izuku Tokita. As Gao would say, nice to meet you, cousin. As Deku and Gao would actually spend a lot more time together in the coming weeks. But Deku has a test today, as pretty much Mirko would be observing it, but All Might would be conducting the test himself, as everyone would know the rules. The teams would be a little bit different though, as the teams would actually be Deku and Bakugo versus Ojiro and Ida. As Bakugo would say, on the same team, huh? As Deku would say, seems like it. Try not to slow me down. As pretty much, Bakugo would say, sure thing. As Deku and Bakugo would move in, as Deku would not have a hero outfit whatsoever. Instead, he would wear a dry fit shirt with fighting trunks, and that would be it. As he would also just start walking in there, as he would look at everywhere, as he would be moving in from place to place, as he would finally feel something, as Bakugo would be blasting off to go find the device, as he would get to where Ida's at, but notice Ojiro's not there. And that's when Ojiro tries to put Deku in a actual submission hold, but it would not work because Deku would use Weeping Willow, which would redirect Ojiro's attack and would cancel it out, as Ojiro's just like, what the hell? And Deku would just say, alright, time for something a bit more painful, as he would use Chi blockage, destroying the nerves and Ojiro's inner thigh, which would cause him to just be completely disrupted. As pretty much Deku would say, let's try one more time, as he would use it again, but this time he would actually disrupt the autonomic nervous system, which would cause Ojiro to shut down, completely knocking him out. As Deku would say, there we go. As he would say he's not perfectly proficient at it quite yet, but he's almost there. As he would think that Gao could actually teach him a lot. So, pretty much, Deku wins his fight, as Bakugo is trying to fight Ida, and overall, Bakugo does win. As Bakugo and Deku would win, as they would high-five each other, and they would have the fastest time out of anyone that day. As Ojiro would have to have serious work done on him to revive/fix his nervous system. So he's going to be out of commission for a while because Recovery Girl doesn't want to risk healing him and the nerve system not healing along with it. So he's actually having to go to a specialist. So yeah, he's out for a while. As Deku knew he could have beat him with a less painful move, but at the same time, he was really salty about him saying the Niko style was a dead form of martial arts just because Deku was the only user left. As pretty much he hates when people say that because he doesn't want his own hard work trivialized by people saying, oh, it's a dead martial art. And he doesn't want people disrespecting Oma, the man who worked so hard to build up the Niko style. So, yeah, that's why Deku went as far as he did. As pretty much the rest of the fights pretty much just go the same way as in canon, just switch Uraraka and Ojiro's places, and I don't think it would change all that much. So, yeah, that's what happens there. Class is dismissed, and Mirko actually checks up on Deku to make sure that he's good. And Deku just says that he's fine. There's nothing really that needs to be checked up for. As, you know, Deku just gives her a kiss and says that he's got to go meet somebody. As she says, oh, and who is this person? Deku says, don't worry about it. So, Mirko heads on home as she just sits on her couch and honestly, she starts to work out. Because she's not going to be sitting on her ass for long, and she's hitting the weights. So, while Mirko's hitting the weights, Deku's actually doing footwork exercises with Ryuk, as Ryuk is just honestly training Deku to get him in the best possible shape, as he asks him if he would like to learn any of the Gao style. Deku would say no, that the Niko style is all he needs, as Ryuk would say that the Gao style is actually the previous form of the Niko style. As Deku would say, what? As Ryuk would explain the complex history of the Gao style and Niko style, which is something I'm not going to do in this video because I've already wasted enough of your time talking about the Niko style. So yeah, I'm not covering that here. But let me know if you guys do want a full history and backstory on the Niko style. Let me know. Pretty much, Deku's just having a lot of fun learning with Gao, as basically Ryuk is reminding him a lot about Oma, but a happier version of Oma. As Yamashita would tell Deku that he's happy that he's learning a lot, and it's important to learn from other fighters, as Deku would say, you're right. So, after learning footwork from Ryuk for a few days, Deku would decide that after the USJ, he's gonna go pay Cosmo Imai a visit. And so, Deku just heads on down there, as he's getting ready for the USJ, as he throws on his dry fit shirt, his fighting trunks, he throws on some actual ankle supports and some fighting combat boot. Not really boots, but just some combat shoes that you could really just find anywhere that's low tops. So that's kind of just his style right now, as he's just chilling in the back of the bus as Mirko's driving them there. So yeah, Bako would be sitting back there with him, as everyone else would try to talk to Deku. Deku is not a friendly person, so yeah, everyone just can't get through to the guy. But Bako just talks to Deku normally, and everyone's surprised about that, as Deku just says that he respects strength over anything else. If you're strong, he'll talk. If you're weak, he doesn't give a fuck. As everyone then realizes that Deku's not talking to them because he sees them as weak. As Todoroki says, you honestly think I'm weak? As Bakugo just says, look, icy hot, don't even try this. As basically Todoroki would say, icy hot, and Bakugo says, yeah, I know you have a quirk that's called half hot, half cold, which basically means you have ice and fire, right? Well, icy hot, that's your name, deal with it. As Deku just laughs a little bit at that, as Todoroki would actually just glare at Deku, as Deku just says, trust me, even with that quirk of yours, you only use ice. And trust me, there's not a whole lot you could do against me with ice. As Todoroki would just say, guess we'll find out when the sports festival happens, now won't we? As Deku says, sports festival's a long ways off, and I got bigger fish to fry than you. As Todoroki would feel even more insulted and trivialized. So, he's honestly kind of mad, as Deku's just chilling back there with Bakugo as they start listening to music, as Deku just listens to anything that Bakugo listens, and Bakugo just so happens to be really into rap, so that's what Deku and Bakugo are jamming to. So, pretty much, they get to the USJ, they get out of there, and they head inside. As 13 starts to just talk about how dangerous quirks are and everything like that, as Deku's really not paying attention. He doesn't have a quirk, so he feels like it doesn't even apply to him. So he just starts looking around, and that's when he sees people moving, as he says, "Hey, are these people part of the test too?" As basically 13's like, what people? As Deku points them out, as that's when they see that there's basically just a bunch of villains coming out of nowhere, and a warp gate's opening up, and Shigaraki and Nomu step out. As pretty much Deku's just like, finally, some excitement. As Mirko says, well, let's get them. As Mirko and Deku just blitz them, as everyone else is evacuating. But Kurogiri warp gates them all over the place. And without Deku there, Mina and, well, not Mina, but Asui and Mineta have a very different time. As Mineta would actually get very injured, as would Asui trying to escape. But they would ultimately escape, but they would be scarred after seeing how things have happened. As pretty much like everyone else would just be having a way more difficult time with the villains, because once again, like, Mirko is there, as they would know that, and they would send stronger villains. So yeah, it wouldn't just be the fodderized people for someone that was as low on the list as Aizawa compared to someone as high up on the list as Mirko. And to kill All Might, the Nomu that has shock absorption, Mirko's attacks wouldn't be doing anything. And that's where Deku would actually come in, as his Niko style would probably be working out the best in the situation, since their attacks aren't really hurting the Nomu all that well. On the outside, Deku decides that it's time to use Entanglement and break the joints and bones at the same time, which he does do successfully, but that's when Shigaraki says, "So, trying to break his bones, that won't work. Nomu has a regeneration power." As that's when Deku just says, well, fuck. So he says, okay, well, here we go. As he just starts using Marionette to try and buy time, while Mirko's having to fight all of the other villains, as she does knock them out, and they're having to seriously hold the line, like, incredibly just difficult, because for one, they're in a much more dire situation. The villains are stronger than in canon, they're a lot more vicious, and they're not going to waste time with students. Instead, they'll just go for killing them. As a few of the students actually don't make it out of there alive. As a few of those students that do die would be like Kaminari when he goes stupid, and the villain that catches him, he actually wouldn't waste any time. He would just snap Kaminari's neck, and that would be that. As Mirko would trust to Deku to handle Nomu while she's going and saving some of the students that she can. And a lot of these villains that are in here are part of an organization called the Worm. As basically, they're heavily trained martial artists and weapons experts, and they are like just demolishing the students. Like, there's literally hardly any chance for them to really succeed and get past there. But Todoroki's helping out a lot by freezing the mass majority of them. However, they seem specifically interested in taking Deku alive, as Deku doesn't know why. But that's when All Might bursts through the door, but he's not alone. Instead, there's Ryuk with him, as he would immediately go into action, killing all of the Worms members that are still like unfrozen and hurting the students, as the overall casualties would be basically Kaminari, Toru, and the final one would actually be Mineta, as Mineta getting injured would cause, at the ship zone, would actually be a more mortal wound, and he would have bled out and died. So Mineta's dead, Kaminari's dead, and Toru, aka Invisible Girl, are dead. All three of them have died at the USJ. As pretty much Deku is seriously just like infuriated at this point, and he's had enough. So what does he do? He decides it's time to whip out one of the Niko style's secret techniques, Demon's Bane. As Nomu would hit Deku, Deku would redirect the blow right back at the Nomu, sending it flying, as All Might would be surprised. And keep in mind, Nomu packs as much power as All Might does, kind of. So yeah, that would really just be doubling Nomu's own power right back at him and adding Deku's. So really, yeah, Nomu would get fucked, as Nomu would be sent flying back, as basically Deku would see that Nomu's still up and around, and he would be so mad at this point. He would go into the advance, but he wouldn't actually be in control. He would be using a imperfect version, as he would just blitz Nomu as fast as he could, using one of the Flame Kata's techniques, which you all know which one it is by now. It's the one and only fucking Earth Shrinking, as that's one of the only ones he can actually use with the advance. So yeah, he uses that to just blitz Nomu and hit him with a parade of punches and kicks, as All Might would jump in and would start overwhelming Nomu, and together with Deku, they would actually destroy Nomu. Like, it would be so one-sided, it's not even fair. As Ryuk got done killing all of the Worm members, which they're known as terrorists now, so Gao's not going to get in any real trouble for killing them, as Gao leaves before the police even get there. So not even All Might knew when Gao left, but you know, let's face it, Deku did, because he actually trained with the guy, so he knows all of his movements and that shit. So really, Deku's not too concerned with Ryuk at the time. And I know I'm calling him Gao and Ryuk, like, I just do that subconsciously. Like, yeah, I go between his first name and last name, so deal with it. But anyway, after that USJ part, Deku is literally just like broken down and tired. So Nezu just takes him home, as Deku lays down on the bed and just passes out. And pretty much Deku wakes up the next morning as he looks into the mirror and sees that there's dried blood on his nose. As he washes it off and says, "What happened there?" As he looks at his bed in the light now and sees there's a pretty good amount of blood on the bed from where his nose was bleeding. As Deku just says, "What's happening?" As he calls Kamoshida and tells him that, and Kamoshida says, "You're overusing the advance. Don't do that. It will kill you." As Deku says, "Yeah, I got you." So Yamashita actually knows the whole deal as to why Deku can't take a match right now, so he tells Deku that he's got 1 month to rest up before his match. And the sports festival is in 2 months. So Deku rests up for the month. Not a whole lot happens. He spends time with Mirko. He starts learning from Cosmo. And by the time his match is there, he's literally a grappling expert. Like, the dude's mastered everything in the Water Kata, and plus has some extra moves from Cosmo. So basically, Deku is able to enter the zone, which exists in 0.001 seconds, or something similar to that. It's a very short amount of time that he has to move. So Deku uses that and puts the guy into a Water Kata submission. The one he uses is Jellyfish Hold, and basically forces the guy's neck back so fast, and he holds it there as the guy literally can't breathe and is knocked out, as Deku would have won. As everyone would just be like, "What the hell?" As Deku would just walk out of there. Nezu would be relieved that the school wouldn't be taken over, and the person who he actually, was competing against was the principal at Shiketsu High. So Nezu gains all of the assets and resources to Shiketsu, which means there is now new students transferred over to UA. Oh yeah, Inasa's in class 1A, baby. So the next day with that, Deku goes to school after his match. He would see a new student in there at the front of the class, as he would walk in kind of late, as basically Deku would just sit down and Inasa would introduce himself, as he would go to shake Deku's hand, and Deku would be looking at his muscle build, as he would say, "Okay, sure." So he would shake Inasa's hand and say, "You got a pretty nice muscle build there." As Inasa would say, "Oh, well, thank you." As pretty much Deku would just say, "Yeah, well, whatever." And pretty much Mirio would actually take an interest in Deku a lot earlier because of his reputation at the USJ. As Aizawa would also take an interest in Deku, but Nezu would not allow either of them to go near him. So pretty much Deku's just chilling. The next month passes by as Inasa becomes fast friends with a good majority of the people in there, except for Deku and Shoto, because Todoroki just, yeah, Inasa and Todoroki aren't vibing. And pretty much Bakugo is dating somebody now. He's dating Cammy, as Cammy's a year above him, but Bakugo really doesn't care. Like, they're in college. It's alright. So she's just watching Bakugo at the sports festival and just waiting for it to start, as Bakugo's just pretty much chilling. He's pretty happy in this one, so he doesn't make a declaration of war at Deku because he knows, like, Deku's stronger than him. But he still does want to fight him and doesn't want to lose to him, and he tells him that in private, as Deku just says that, of course, like, if it comes to it, they'll have a good fight. And pretty much, like, since Deku is quirkless, he is allowed the option to register support items to help him, but he denies. He says he'll get by this on his own power alone. As pretty much, like, Deku's just confident, as he's just ready for this to be over with. So, the sports festival starts, but before it can, Nezu enters the room and tells Deku that he will not be allowed to participate in the sports festival because he has prior arrangements to deal with. As Deku says, huh? As Nezu pulls him out to the hallway and says, the Kangen Association would like to have a word with you. Mr. Yamashita's up there and he's not a very happy man. As Deku's like, alright, well, I'll head right up there with you. As they just start walking off. So as the sports festival starts, like, a lot of things would go differently. Because now that Inasa's there, like, he would be right there with Todoroki and Bako, but he would actually be a lot faster because of his wind quirk. So the person who takes first place would be Inasa in the race. So, yes, that's what happened. But since the school is part of the Kangen Association, there's different things besides just immediately moving from the next round onto the next round. There's semi-promotional Kangen matches in between, as basically the Kangen Association has become a legitimized business now thanks to Yamashita, as he would tell Deku he's fighting in the first match. And Deku's like, wait, who am I fighting? As Yamashita says, that's a surprise. So, Deku would head down there, as he would be waiting for his opponent. As Deku would actually be the second one to enter the ring and wouldn't be the first person, as he has to wait to be announced, as does the other guy. As Deku's opponent would be announced, as it would be an American fighter, as they would say, introducing the Emperor, Adam Dudley. As Adam would make his way in, as they would announce that he is weighing in at 236 pounds. His height is 6 foot 4 inches, with a total assets of 7,640,000,000 yen. As Deku would just say, damn, he's got 66 pounds on me. As Deku would only be weighing at 170 pounds. So he's not as heavy as Oma was at his age. So Deku gets introduced as the new rising star in the Kangen Association, the man who has won 4 matches with 0 losses. Get ready for the Rookie of the Year, pretty much, since he's the only rookie. But she says, introducing the Ashura, Izuku, and Tokita, as Deku would walk right on in, and everyone would be shocked completely. Like, they were shocked at the name alone, as Bakugo, Todoroki, Hinasa, everyone in the class would be shocked that Deku's part of the Kangen Association and has already fought in 4 matches. As Yamashita would smile, Nezu would grin, extremely happy, as Deku would walk in and say, "So, an American." As Adam would say, "Bet your ass." And Deku's like, "I'll have fun dismantling you." As Adam says, "Yeah, right, jerk off." As pretty much they two would square up as the match would be officiated, as Adam would extremely just charge right at Deku. However, Deku would have been ready for that, as he would activate from the Adamantine Kata Indestructible, as Adam's force would be hitting Deku, but be put right back at him. And Deku just says that it'd be a shame to just use one technique. So he uses Iron Breaker right after, which incredibly hurts Adam because Deku doesn't use a fist. No, he uses a kick. And Deku kicks him so hard in the face, he actually knocks off the fucking grill that he has that says "damn" on his teeth right out of his mouth. As Deku would be ready, as Adam would hit Deku one good time, and that would send Deku rolling. He would be in a lot of pain, as he's just like, "Damn it, he barely grazed me. He's strong." As Adam would just say, he can throw a punch from any direction, and it would have full force behind it. As Deku's just like, "Oh shit." So Adam would go for another hit. Deku would use Phantom Pace, and then he would hit them with Weeping Willow, redirecting the attack, and then at the very last second, he would use Bind of Pisces, and would basically win the match through submission. As basically Cosmo would be in the stadium, as he would be clapping, as everyone would see the Kangen fighters all coming down to the arena, as it would be full of nothing but the top of the top. As Deku would be looking, he would see Agito, Cosmo Imai, Gaolong, the Thai god of war. He would also see Ryan Kure, as Ryan would just say, "What's up, pissant?" As Deku would just be astonished. All these heavy fighters, as he would continue looking, as he would see Hatsume Sen, Inaba Ryo, and more Kano Haru, as he would just keep looking, as he would see Jun Tsukubayashi, as he would see Sao Pang as well, and that would be all of them, because, Takeshi Wakatsuchi, he was busy and couldn't make it, so that's all they could honestly get. The Devil Lance, not making an appearance because he's off doing his own thing as an incredibly old man. As these would be extremely like the legacy fighters, like legendary Kangen fighters, and Deku was sharing the same stage as them and actually beat Adam Dudley, one of them, as well as beaten Jun Tsukubayashi, who was another one, as Deku would have beat two legacy Kangen fighters who would have had a legendary reputation in the Kangen Association, as pretty much they all would tell the audience around the world about the events of the Kangen Annihilation Tournament, as they would spread the name Oma Tokita all over the place, as Deku's last name would become famous, and pretty much Deku wouldn't know how to handle this, because now he has a decision to make. He can either be a full-fledged Kangen fighter, or a hero. But Nezu steps in and says he can still be both. And Deku says, very well. So that's what he's doing. He's doing his, time to become a hero to save people. And he's doing his Kengan deal to keep improving his fighting style and become better than Oma ever was. As pretty much the sports festival would continue, but Deku would still not be allowed to participate since he is here not as a student, but as a Kengan Association member. So, he would be representing UA, not being a part of the sports festival. So Mirko and Deku would be able to sit down together and actually have a long talk. As the cavalry battle would happen, pretty much just trade Deku out for Inasa, and you pretty much just end up with the same lineup. Another match would happen. This time it would be Cosmo Imai versus Agito. Agito would win, as Cosmo would feel pretty bad, but what can you do? He's the former Fang of Metsuda, so Cosmo's not really too hurt. As pretty much Deku talks to Cosmo, as Agito talks to him as well, as they both wish Deku the best of luck in these fights, as they already know how brutal they can be. And Agito says that Deku actually has real promise, and that actually makes Deku a little bit happy, but Agito says if he ever reaches his level, he'll take him on in a death match. And Deku says that nothing would make him happier. So Agito smiles at Deku and he takes his leave. He signed up for one match and that was it. So pretty much the final event of the sports festival happens with battles. And pretty much like Inasa swarms and just smacks the hell out of Shinzo, as basically Bakugo wins his fight against Uraraka. Everyone still ends up winning their fights that wins. The only thing different is that it's time for, Inasa versus Todoroki. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and say that Inasa would win since Todoroki wouldn't be using his fire side. So, with that, Todoroki loses, and the fight between Bakugo and Inasa would actually be a very close one, but Inasa would barely edge it out and would win. So, Inasa would win the sports festival as a whole, and showing people that he's honestly just there, like he's ready to take the next step and he's the real deal. And everyone would actually really respect Inasa, but they would also show a lot of admiration to Bakugo. So with that out of the way and done, the next thing would be the final exams, but Deku would be exempt since he is Kengan Association deal. And since there were a few deaths at UA and they do have to cover their asses for that, because that whole shitstorm, it's still not over, but it is being kept hush hush just because they don't want the general public to know. So everything's being handled in court very hush hush, and ultimately UA is fined a very extensive amount of money, and they are required to hire basically a certain security company, which would be Ninshi Honji Security Services. And basically, for those of you who don't know, that are the people who employ Cosmo Imai. So for Deku's whole internship thing, he would actually be going to Cosmo once again to continue learning more about striking this time, because even though Cosmo's known as the King of Stranglers, he's also a very good striker. So he would be teaching Deku about striking people, and that's when Adam would also give Deku even more lessons, as Deku would honestly have to fight on ice skates throughout the whole time until he was able to master it, which he did that relatively easily, and the rest of the time he would be fighting Adam and Cosmo as a tag team. Like every time one of them got pinned or struck down by Deku, the other one would tag in, and Deku would be heavily exhausted, but his Niko style would develop exponentially. He would become a lot stronger, being able to throw punches from awkward positions and keeping his balance at all times. It would just eliminate so many weaknesses he had, as he would feel the Niko style developing more and more, as he would feel like he's finally evolving the Niko style past what Oma did. So he would be very happy. Now, Ida's brother would still be attacked by Stain. That would still happen, as Stain would still be a huge threat, but Deku really wouldn't be there to help Ida. And Inasa would be. So Inasa would be the one to save Ida's life, because Ida and Inasa are good friends. Deku isn't good friends with hardly anyone in there except for Bakugo, and Mirko is honestly realizing that Deku actually has to do a lot of growing, as Deku would return from his training camp type of thing stronger, as once again he would be exempt from the final exams. Everyone else would take their final exams, they would pass, and those that would fail would still fail. Inasa would actually pass, as he would be teamed up with Bakugo. But for the ones that died, they're kind of rounded into a group of 3. Whichever group of 3 you want to put them in, that's fine. I'm personally not going to do it. But after that, it's off to the training camp, which Deku would be a part of. And Mirko would actually talk to Deku because, of course, the security services people would be driving, so Mirko could have a heart-to-heart with Deku. As Bakugo would be texting Cammy all the time, as their relationship would have blossomed by now, and Bakugo would be very happy with Cammy. As Mirko would tell Deku he needs to start opening up more and needs to be interacting with his classmates more, because a lot of them don't like him just like brushing them off and not giving them the time of day. He's still a student and he still needs to take things seriously. As Deku would just say, like, it doesn't matter to him, that weaklings don't interest him. And Mirko said, what if she was weak? Deku says straight up that she would never have interested him if she was weak. And Mirko slaps the fuck out of Deku, as Deku just says, the hell is that for? And she says, you really don't know when to shut up, do you? And Deku would be really confused, but at the same time, he really wouldn't care. So he would just be thinking about it though, because it would still be on his mind. But once he gets there and they drop them down, Deku would just be running. He's not about to just use any of the Niko style, the blitz there, but he is running at a good pace and he's just dodging them all. Like all the little golem shits that are after him, like he's just dodging them. So he would actually get there, and since he did live with Nezu, and Yamashita did teach Deku like cooking skills, Deku would have to cook for himself a lot because Nezu's not really the best type to do that. So Deku would honestly take over the cooking role that night, as he actually wouldn't be tired because that's just light work to him. Like, he's not tired at all. So he helps cook, and everyone just realizes he's actually good at something other than fighting. But they're still concerned, like, how is he not gassed? And Deku says it's light work for him. So basically, Deku hits the hot springs as everything goes fine. Like, Kota doesn't actually hit Deku in the balls because Deku doesn't even interact with the kid at all. Like, he pays him no mind. And pretty much, he's chilling in the bath as everyone joins him, and they're kind of just asking Deku questions, and Deku does start answering some of them. He starts interacting with them a little bit because, like Mirko said, like, he does need to interact with people more. So that's what he's doing. Does he like it? Not one bit. But is he doing it? Yes. As basically Inasa would actually start talking to Deku more and more, and Deku, he would be sociable, but he doesn't considering himself friends with anybody, but he would understand their situations. As they would ask Deku, you know, what was his father like? And what was his mother like? And Deku's just never had a mother. And his father, Oma, was kind. Tough as hell and strict like a motherfucker, but kind. And caring. And actually saved his life a lot of times. As everyone would just see him like, oh, that's cool. As he would say that Yamashida's been like a grandfather to him. And they're like, oh, old man Yamashita? Isn't he? And Deku says, don't worry about it. And it was like, okay, cool. So they would honestly understand Deku's situation a lot. Like, Deku would never even mention Inko or Hisashi to anybody, ever. And Banko already knows better than to speak that bullshit. So, yeah, he doesn't really talk to anyone about that, and nobody knows. So, pretty much, like, that goes on, and the day comes where Class 1B joins, and they see Deku's workout regime is intense as fuck, as he's sparring with 10 of the security services guys with nothing but his, you know, fighting trunks, as they're fully armored and trying to take him down as he's taking them down one by one, Niko style, usage after Niko style. Like, they're just kind of surprised as Tiger tries to throw hands with Deku and Tiger gets his ass kicked. And, well, his or her ass, like, whichever one Tiger is. And pretty much, like, nobody can really go toe-to-toe with Deku, as they're wondering who would actually win in a fight now, Deku or All Might? And pretty much, All Might is actually very interested in Deku becoming his successor, but he never had a chance to talk to Deku at all. So All Might decides to pay a little visit to these, you know, training camp. So when All Might gets there, he sees this little boy, and he actually stops to talk to him. And that's the night that the villain attack happened, so All Might dropping by that night and actually talking to Kota saved his life from getting killed by Muscular. But sadly, he doesn't save other lives, as some of the students are running with severe burns on their bodies, and basically all of Class 1B that were in the woods to scare Class 1A, they get killed because Dabi just immediately engulfs everything with fire. He's there to kill heroes and hero students alike. And pretty much security services guys are not going to take that shit lying down. Like, they just lost a whole class of students for being burned alive, as others were shot dead, eaten. Like, no, the security guys have had enough. They go in there and they start lighting everybody up. Like, they killed Mustard, they killed a fucking creepy tooth guy. Like, those two dead off rip. Dabi actually gets shot in the legs as he falls to the ground on his knees, as they also shoot him in his shoulders so he can't move. The security guys are no joke, as they round up all the surviving students and get them inside. As pretty much, like, the only one person that did survive from class 1B was Kendo. But even then, she has burns on different parts of her body. As pretty much Toga would be killed. Like, she wouldn't, as soon as she would come at them with a knife, they would shoot her in the head. And since Toga has no real head protection, yeah. Twice, he would be shot dead. Muscular would be apprehended, but it would take the help of Deku and All Might, but mainly Deku had it. All Might just wanted to be there to support Deku, but Deku handled it all by himself by using the Weeping Willow, and then he took it another step forward and broke the guy's fucking body with Entanglement. So yeah, Muscular literally just got his ass kicked. But that would leave the League of Villains down every new member that they gained. And pretty much, like, the final fight would happen after they got the information out of Dabi, which they would, because Deku would beat the man senseless and would just keep beating him and beating him. But Deku would actually be the one to go with All Might to fight All for One, because Deku doesn't want to miss this for the world, as Nezu's allowing Deku to go because he's been shown to handle strong threats, and since they need all the help they can get, Deku's pretty much allowed to go. He's granted temporary heroship, so yeah, he's able to go. As the fight would break out, as Deku would rush in there with All Might, as he would take down Shigaraki quickly, breaking his arms and not being allowed to use his quirk, as Shigaraki would be arrested. All for One would break out and multiple Nomus would start coming out, as Deku would start using the advance, as he would have to use it to keep up with the speed of the Nomus. But he would eventually be able to kill them, as he would then go to the fight with All for One. As Deku would keep using the advance more and more, the toll it would start taking on his body as he keeps increasing it. As All for One was about to kill All Might, as Deku comes in and starts deliberately going blow after blow against All for One, using the Water Kata and breaking the bones of All for One, and he would constantly just keep hitting him and hitting him and hitting him, and pretty much, like, Deku would get to the point to where the advance would overtax his body and he would fall, as the side effects would be instantaneous. He'd be bleeding from his eyes, coughing up large amounts of blood, as he would be wheezing heavily, but he would get right back up on his feet. As that's when All for One would hit him with that huge attack, and Deku would trigger the advance once more, just one more time, and use the Niko style secret technique, Demon's Bane, which would end up destroying All for One, as Deku would fall to the ground, as he would be having his back against the building pieces that are there, as he would look up and would just smile and tell Oma he'll see him soon, as he would drop his head, close his eyes, and would die from his heart failing. The advance would kill him, as Deku would be no more, but he would be seen as the strongest fighter the world has ever known. And that's what would happen if Deku had the Niko style. Hope you guys enjoyed. I've been the Crown Fiend. Peace.